Hi everyone, welcome to 1.5 Entrepreneurs and Leaders. This is the last of the units in Theme 1. So if you've not had a look at all of the other videos in Theme 1, you can see them all on the YouTube channel there. 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, and then this one. This one's a strange one. There's 6 topics here, so it seems like it's quite a big unit. Actually, a lot of them are very, very small, and this is going to be quite a bit listy, but there is one topic in here that is a really quite complicated one, which is forms of business. And so we'll probably spend most of our time there. So let's just get straight into it. So this is all about entrepreneurs and the people who run organizations and run businesses. And so the first thing we need to know is what an entrepreneur is. An entrepreneur is someone who shows initiative and takes risks by starting a business. So anyone who starts a company is an entrepreneur. Anyone who does any kind of enterprise, that's what the term entrepreneur comes from. It comes from the term enterprise, and enterprise is all about showing initiative, taking risks. So this topic is about the role of an entrepreneur, and it's really important that you pay attention to the way these are worded, because it could be that an exam question specifically asks for roles of an entrepreneur, and you'd be expected to know these specific ones. So here are a few of the roles that an entrepreneur has to carry out. The first is an obvious one: starting a business. Like, that's the obvious part of an entrepreneur. Like, that's what makes an entrepreneur, defined as an entrepreneur. Creating and starting a business. If you don't do this, it goes without saying, if you don't set up a business, there is no business. So it's obviously a really, really important role. But once you've started a business, there are other parts to it as well. So running and expanding a business and helping a business grow, that's a part of being an entrepreneur. Innovating within a business. So this is what we call intrapreneurship, which is where perhaps you might already be working in an existing business, but you're able to develop business ideas alongside that or within that. It could be anticipating risk and uncertainty and putting things in place to mean that when risks and uncertainties happen, you have ways of being able to counter it. So effective decision making and all sorts of things like that, being creative with your ideas. So those are the roles of an entrepreneur. The second topic, 1.5.2, I told you we'd get through some of these quick, are motives and characteristics. And so I've had a few students come to see me recently about trying to understand the difference between motives and characteristics. And so I want to make this really, really clear. A motive is like an objective and a goal. Like, what is it you want to achieve out of a business? And then the characteristics are the attributes and skills that a leader or an entrepreneur must have. So for personal objectives and goals, we've got a few. So we've got some that we can split into financial and non-financial. Much similar to our motivators, we can split our objectives into financial and non-financial. So our financial objectives are profit maximization, and these are like personal. So these aren't business objectives. We're going to do that in the next topic. These are personal objectives. So if I started a business, what would I want to achieve? Someone who wants to get the most possible profit, maybe we all want to have a yacht, don't we, on the south of France, or a nice house in a beach somewhere. We all kind of dream of that lifestyle. So if that's the case, we might search for profit maximization. Of course, if we're searching for profit maximization, we're probably going to be working so hard we might not get a chance to enjoy any of that. But that's kind of what that objective is about: getting as much money in profit as possible. The alternative to that is profit satisfying. And so this is I think a lot of people start off by saying, yeah, I want profit maximization. I know if I ask my year 12s which of these strategies which of these objectives they'd want to go for, they'd probably all say profit maximization. But I think in reality, when people start their businesses and they realize the amount of work that goes in, they might change to more of a profit satisfying kind of process where they make enough profit to live a good quality of life. Not trying to get as much as possible, but just trying to get enough to live a good quality of life. But we also have non-financial reasons for starting businesses. So for example, this could be ethics. We might want to do something to change the world or do something to create positive change and social impact. So that could be, for example, using environmentally friendly methods. My brother's, for example, he's got a business, and one of his big reasons for his business is he wants to try and reduce the impact on the environment. And so he does a lot of work with renewable energy. He's an electrician. And building and refurbishing old houses to make them more energy efficient. So that's for the purpose of ethics. For some people, it's just about, independence and control. It might be that your personal circumstances mean that you need to have control of when you work. You want that flexibility. Or it might just be that you don't want to have a different boss. You want to be able to work for yourself, and you want to be able to have control of what you actually do for a job. Rather than working for someone else, you'd rather work for yourself. So that could be a non-financial objective. And it's worth clarifying at this point. Of course, Your objectives might be a combination of several of these. In terms of the attributes and skills, there's a variety of these that we might need to have. Creativity to come up with ideas, resilience, because it is difficult to make a business, and more than half of new businesses fail within the first 5 years, so it does take a lot of work to get these businesses right. Taking risks, of course, we talked about this when we introduced what an entrepreneur is. That's really, really important. Organization, because you can have a great idea, but if you don't have the organizational skills to support that, you might find it's difficult to be successful. Determination, and again that links to kind of resilience, but the determination to be willing to put the work in to make an idea work. Look, becoming an entrepreneur and becoming a really successful business isn't easy. It does require a lot of work. The next topic is business objectives. And so this is quite similar to the personal objectives and the motives we just looked at, but in this sense, it is the objectives of the business rather than the objectives of the individual. And so I want to introduce these kind of three terms here because I think these are really important when we think about how these work. Businesses have an aim, and the aim could be a variety of different things. Usually for a lot of businesses, the aim is to make a huge amount of profit or to be the biggest or best business in their market in the world. But you can't just say you have an aim and then expect that it's going to happen. And this is the case personally as well. If you have an aim of getting really, really good A-levels, saying you want to get a really good A-level in business, just saying that that's your aim does not mean that that's going to happen. There's going to be plenty of other things that you have to do to help you get there. So that's where these objectives come in as well. So our objectives are going to be our strategy, our targets, where if we meet these targets, this will help us reach our aim. So you might have the aim of getting into a university of your choice. And so your objective might be, well, I need to get an A and 2 Bs or something like that. And the idea is meeting these objectives will help you reach your aim. But again, you can't just say my target is to get an A and suddenly expect that that's going to happen. You have to put strategies in place to help you get there. So your strategies are going to be your plans, your revision plans. Potentially what you're doing right now, depending on when you're listening to this. This might be revising for an exam. This is part of that strategy. And the idea is your strategy helps you meet your objectives, which helps you meet your aim. So this should be a kind of process that works. You start with your short-term stuff. You work towards your medium to long-term objectives. You reach your long-term aim. What kind of aims do businesses typically have? Well, profit maximization. We mentioned this for the personal objectives, but this is a business objective as well. Some businesses will want to try and make as much profit as possible. For some businesses, and actually probably for every business as they start, survival will be the biggest aim. Just staying alive, just the business continue to exist the following year, reaching their break-even point so that they can continue to operate and then potentially, turn into profit in the future. Quite often for small businesses and new businesses, the first 2 years are all about survival, building reputation and what have you. So those are the two main kind of objectives, but there are a range of others as well that are worth introducing. So another is sales maximization, which is similar to profit maximization, except for the priority here isn't to make a profit. The priority here is to sell a lot of products. Even if you're not necessarily making very much profit at all, this could be really important for a newer business that's trying to compete in a large market, because sales maximization, the more sales you get, the more awareness you've got. And that could potentially lead to profit in the future. For some businesses, their objective could be market share. So they might have 12% market share and they might be targeting to get 15. So there's quite an obvious kind of target there, and then they could put strategies in place to help them get there. This is the case. You think about the grocery market where there are a lot of businesses that have lost market share. They're trying to get that back. Meanwhile, Aldi and Lidl are just trying to slowly build their market share and take it away from the bigger companies. It could be cost efficiency. So the objective of trying to make sure you're not spending money inefficiently. So looking at your costs, looking at where you can potentially cut costs without affecting quality. It could be an objective of customer satisfaction. And again, you might hope that getting that customer satisfaction could lead to other potential objectives being met in the long term. And finally, we talked about this when we said about ethics for the individual. Well, businesses could have social objectives as well. So they might have objectives of reducing their impact on the environment or increasing their recycling or something along the lines of that, becoming more sustainable. And again, of course, businesses can have more than one of these objectives, but you're probably not going to see survival and profit maximization being shared objectives. It might be that a business starts with the survival objective and then moves towards profit maximization as they kind of establish themselves. Now, into 1.5.4, this is the biggest topic in this unit by a distance. And there's a variety of different key terms here that you need to be aware of. And these are mentioned in so many businesses and so many case studies because every business is one of these forms of business. So the first thing to introduce is the difference between limited liability and unlimited liability. So liability is effectively what you are responsible for. And typically in this situation, we're talking about responsibility for debt. So the idea here is limited liability is where your personal assets are protected. And we'll talk about why that is the case in a moment. Whereas unlimited liability, your personal assets are vulnerable. So if you own a business that is or you're running as an unlimited liability business, if the business has debts that it can't pay, you are liable as an individual for those debts. That could mean your car, your house could be taken and sold to pay for these, to recoup some money to pay for these debts. So if we look at the forms of business, we're going to put them into this big table here. As you can see, it takes up like half the screen. So this is when I said this was a big topic. I wasn't lying. We've got our limited liability businesses and our unlimited liability businesses. And what this is the difference between an unincorporated business and an incorporated business. So effectively, really here, our unlimited liability businesses, they're not actually registered as businesses. This is just someone or a group of people operating a company, but there's no legal company there. There's no legal difference between the individuals and their business. So the first of these, and the most common, is the sole trader. So a huge number of businesses in the UK are sole traders, and this is just one person on their own running a business, and it doesn't have any separate legal identity. So these have unlimited liability. So if a sole trader incurs a huge amount of debt, then they would be liable personally for repaying that debt. There are benefits to being a sole trader. For example, any income you make just counts as your income. You don't have to publish your financial data. You don't have to publish financial statements. We'll talk about that a little bit more when we look at the other types. But also it's easy. It's easy. You don't actually have to do anything. You can just start selling things. So if I started knitting hats, for example, and selling them on Etsy, I could be a sole trader. And this is quite useful if I don't feel like there's any risk of potential debt there. If I don't feel like there's the risk that my personal assets would be at risk anyway, then I might just stick with sole trader because it's easier. A partnership is very similar to a sole trader, but instead of it just being one person, it's between 2 and 21 people, and they share the risk and they share the work. You would have to be careful if you're working in a partnership about making sure you all understand who is responsible for what, because obviously, as we said, unlimited liability means your potential personal assets could be vulnerable. But it also means you've got more ideas, you've got more opportunities to sort of split work, you potentially can create it at a bigger scale because there's more than one person. If you want that protection, or if your business is growing and there's risk of debt, then it's recommended that you have a limited liability business and you actually legally register your business with Companies House. So the first of these, and by far the most common, is the private limited company. So this is just a registered company under private ownership, and you could sell a share in this business, but it would be under private ownership. So you'd have to agree to who you were selling it to. It wouldn't be publicly available. So you could you could invite new shareholders, but again, it's privately owned between you and the people you've agreed to own the business with. Because you are a registered company, you have to fit certain legal criteria. You have to publish your financial statements on the Companies House, so anyone can see your financial statements, and you have to say that you're a private limited company in the name of your business. So if you see LTD at the end of the name of a company, that's because it's a private limited company. If your company is getting really large and you look to float it on the stock market to raise some finance, you would become a public limited company. And there's, again, a range of requirements you have to meet here in order to become one. But this is where a business has been floated on the stock market to raise share capital to potentially allow a business to expand. This typically happens with large companies. And so this is where if they're potentially looking to grow, and they can't afford to do that with their retained profit, they might look to gain some finance from elsewhere, for example, from investors on the stock market to use to fund their business growth. The downside, of course, is you have to publish your financial information, and potentially if you float on the stock market, you will lose some control within the organization. But of course, that depends on how many of the shares and how much percentage-wise you sell. We also have two others that you need to be aware of. We've got the concept of a franchise, where a franchisor allows a franchisee to run an outlet of the business. So McDonald's, Subway, KFC, Burger King, they all use this really, really successfully to grow without having to do it all themselves. The individual kind of entrepreneurs who take on these businesses will do that for them. The benefit to the franchisee is they get to use a fully established brand and be able to benefit from all the expertise and all of the infrastructure that's already available. And we also have a social enterprise, which is a business that exists for a social or ethical purpose, like a charity or a foundation or something like that. Their objective isn't necessarily to make a profit. Well, I mean, it is to make a profit, but that profit isn't then going to private owners. It's going to the cause. 1.5.5 is a really, really straightforward one. It's just about business choices, and there's two main things that you need to be aware of. You've got opportunity cost and trade-off, and you need to know the difference between these two. So the difference is pretty straightforward. An opportunity cost is what you sacrifice when you make a decision. So the next best alternative. And typically this is going to be because of a limited amount of time or money. And so you have to make a choice between one of two things. So if you go to a restaurant and you have the steak, that means you can't have the burger. Unless you've got all the money in the world and you want to just order both and have a bit of half each. Typically, most people will just have to choose one of the two. So if you choose the steak, you sacrifice the opportunity cost is the burger. I have an opportunity cost by recording this video. It's a Friday night. I could be sat downstairs watching TV. I could be doing all sorts of different things. And so I'm sacrificing those things to do this video. So therefore, my opportunity cost is what else I could have been doing. The trade-off is a little bit different in that you can have both with a trade-off, but you can't have all of both. So the more of one thing you have, the less of another you have. So again, this could be mostly likely the result of time or sometimes money, where you don't have the time to do both of these things fully. So the more of one thing you do, the less of another thing you do. So if you're an owner of a business, the more time you spend developing your website, well, that's less time you're spending interacting with customers. The more time you spend developing product ideas, it could be the less time you spend with your family or something like that. So with a trade-off, you can have both, but the more you have of one, the less you have of the other. One of the most common trade-offs is the trade-off between profit and ethics. So where businesses focus on trying to make a profit, they might sacrifice some ethical standing, or if they're really focused on being ethical, they might have to sacrifice some profit in order to let that happen. The last topic, moving from entrepreneur to leader, is another really, really small one. The key thing is just to understand how this happens. And usually it happens due to growth and scale. So as a business gets bigger, only in a really, really small business will an entrepreneur be able to do all of the work themselves. And there's a variety of reasons why they may need to then become leaders of other employees instead of just being entrepreneurs in their own right. So this could be because they may need help. They might physically not be able to do all of the work themselves. So they might have to get employees in to just help them with their workload. It might be that they may need new skills that they don't have. So for example, it could be that someone starts a business and they're great with coming up with the product ideas and the marketing and the production, but they aren't very good with the finance and the accounting. And so they need an employee who can do that for them. It could be that and obviously that's also then worth linking to the fact that you might have to give up some level of control when you grow. And I think sometimes that can be quite difficult for an entrepreneur who's created a business of their own image and created a business on their own hard work to potentially allow others to be involved. And so it's just about understanding the difficulties from being an entrepreneur to becoming a leader. So that covers all of theme 1. If you've hopefully you've managed to watch all of those, I think that probably in about an hour and a half or so, we've covered like the entire a quarter of the course, which is quite wild when you think about it, really. So it's just worth explaining again. This is not a comprehensive overview, but hopefully it gives you a bit of an idea and a bit of a recap of the main kind of topics and terms and the things you need to know when you're preparing for exams or when you're just revising this content. Again, as I've mentioned at the end of all of the other videos, because that's kind of how YouTubers do things, and that's obviously what I am. There's a bunch of resources available in the description. So if you do want to have a little look at some extra things like Quizlet, for example, for key terms, or an exam question grid to practice some of these key topics, have a look at the links in the description. Have a look at the other videos in this playlist. And obviously, hopefully by the time you're watching this, you might see some themes 2, 3, and 4 up there as well, because they're all coming over the next couple of weeks. And in fact, depending on when you're watching this, they might have been up there for a long period of time. So thanks for watching these ones so far. Hopefully you'll continue to find these useful. And if you've got any questions or if there's anything you want to ask, please do just put that in the comments and I will answer as many as I can. Thank you very much.